Hello, everybody. Um, so as we just wait for a few more people to come on to the meeting, I will start introducing the speakers. So I am Jenny DeRocher. I'm a librarian in the Archives and Local History Department at the La Crosse Public Library. Tonight, we have three panelists who will each give a short talk on their personal expertise to give you an idea of what questions they can best answer about your own home projects, which we'll do in the second half of the program. After each panelist speaks, after all of them speak, we'll start a Q&A session. As they talk in the first half of the program, feel free to write questions in the chat and I can relay them for you in the Q&A session, or if you feel more comfortable turning your mic on and explaining your question, please feel free to do that. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the La Crosse Public Library, as well as my own historic home where I'm broadcasting from tonight, occupy the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk, who have stewarded the land since time immemorial. And because I'm from the Archives and Local History Department, I would like to contextualize that and explain it a little bit further before we continue the program. The city of La Crosse occupies land that was once a prairie that was home to a band of Ho-Chunk. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, an attempt to forcibly and often violently remove Indigenous peoples from their ancestral lands located here, east of the Mississippi River, to occupied territory west of the river. Throughout the 1830s and 1840s, the federal government conducted a series of 6 attempts to forcibly remove the local Ho-Chunk by steamboat via the Mississippi River to reservations in Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota, and then finally to Nebraska. The historic steamboat landing where this took place is now Spence Park in downtown La Crosse, which is just across the street from the Charmant and right near the entrance to Riverside Park. However, many of La Crosse's Ho-Chunk found their way back to their homeland, and eventually the federal and local governments moved on to new strategies to eradicate Indigenous folks and culture from the newly established United States of America. This program series is all about managing and preserving our historic homes to make our communities more sustainable and preserve our local cultural heritage. I'm hoping that our speakers inspire you to think about the history of your own home and even the history of the land that your home occupies. So our first speaker tonight is Andy DeRocher. Andy is a design and consulting engineer with HGA, where he specializes in life cycle sustainability and energy solutions in commercial buildings. His past experience includes designing and installing hydronic heating, public plumbing, and renewable energy systems. In his spare time, he and his wife Daniela have been attempting to incorporate high performance building strategies while restoring their 1926 bungalow in Madison, Wisconsin. So I'll let him continue with his story.
Great, thank you. Do you see my screen okay?
We do.
Great. Yeah, so thanks. Yeah, so I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. My day job's an engineer, and we bought this house in 2007. My wife and I. It's about 850 square feet on the first floor. Second floor is maybe 400 to 500 square feet, depending on how you count it. Super basic bungalow. This photograph that you see, it's we think that the date on there is pretty accurate. We know that the house was built in about 1926 and 1927. So this is a picture from what we think is pretty early on, right after the house was built. And I'll get into some of our projects and what our goals were really with our projects. But one of our main goals was to bring the house really back to its original character as much as we could. And in this one photo, it was really it really served as our only blueprint for doing so. Maybe that's not totally true, but it's definitely been the primary thing that we knew about the house, at least about the exterior and the front of the house. So anyway, when we bought the house, it was our first house, and this is about 13, 14 years ago, and we've taken it apart, and we've pretty much put it back together for the most part. And I just have a few projects that we're gonna, I have some photos from, and I'll just fly through them real quick. And one thing I wanted to say, when we embarked on this, on the house and our projects, we just kind of tried to soak up as much as we could. We went to workshops, we talked to a bunch of other homeowners, we were seeing what other people were doing with their houses, and it was really inspirational for us and really helpful. And I think we always saw ourselves trying to return that in some way. Been so entrenched in these projects. This is really, I think, I don't know, we haven't really done that so far the way that we wanted to or envisioned. So I really appreciate the opportunity to, this is really the first time that we've gotten to share. So hopefully there'll be something here that'll be interesting or useful or helpful for somebody out there. And I'd love to hear everybody's reactions and questions at the end here. So right when we first bought the house, so the last picture you saw is really the original photo from when it was built. When we bought the house, it looked more like this. And I think this is pretty typical for what these houses go through over the years. It's what you're looking at here is aluminum siding, and they enclose the front porch. They put up aluminum storm windows everywhere, have these in-wall air conditioners. And to us, it wasn't really what we saw the house could be. Actually, one thing that's missing on this photo too, there's one detail that they added, is that there's these really bad, in my opinion, aluminum awnings that were just kind of tacked on everywhere. And we took the awnings off actually faster than we could get a camera out. So they're not included in the photo, but anyway, that's what it looked like on the outside when we first bought it. Inside, some good and bad to our eyes. Original woodwork on the trim and original windows. There's the original wood floors underneath this carpet. The realtor actually showed that to us, and so that was kind of a good thing. But like the ceiling, it had this tile up on the ceiling. It was obviously covering something up. The light fixtures were just not really our taste. Heating vents were kind of hacked up. This was the kitchen. We think they might have been actually the original wood cabinets. Not really sure about that, but certainly there's been layers upon layers of stuff added in this kitchen. These green plastic tiles were glued onto the walls. I'll get to the floor system in a few slides, but it just wasn't a real functional space. We ended up gutting this. In retrospect, we might have done something different with the cabinets. I'm not sure, but we tore those out too, and just started over from scratch in the kitchen. And so, this is very typical throughout our whole house: bedrooms, bathrooms, everywhere. It's just various remodeling over the years. A lot of it seemed to be 1950s to hard to say, 1980s through the 2000s or so. It was typical stuff that just been built up over the years. Not huge projects, just little patch jobs and little remodeling things to different rooms over the years. So here's a sneak preview of where we're at today. And I'll kind of go over a few projects that I'm picking to gloss over real quick. But here's what our goals were. Like I said earlier, we really wanted to really get back to what we felt like was the home's identity, or the closer to its original character. I'm kind of an energy nut and a building performance nut, so I really wanted to incorporate some of the things that I work with, like during my day job. partly, I guess, as maybe a personal challenge, but like also just to learn more about it, get more hands-on, learn about things firsthand. And then what I mean by increased livability is the second floor in particular was not real great. We think that when the house was first built, it was probably not a inhabitable space on the second floor. We think it was probably intended to be more of a storage attic. And over the years, they changed it to become a habitable space. So, but there wasn't enough headroom. There were structural issues, plumbing issues, and I'll show you. So I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm gonna only spend a few minutes on some of these slides, but feel free to save your questions and ask for more details, and we can be happy to talk about those things more. So really one of the first things that we did, I mentioned earlier, the realtor had shown us that the wood floors were there under the carpet. And that was one of the first projects we tackled. I would say it's one of the most, it was really a game changer for us. It like really changed the feel of the house like right away. It was, I would say, pretty low effort, reasonable cost. You know, we did hire this one out. A lot of the projects that I'm going to show you, we did ourselves. You know, we didn't hire out to a contractor, but we definitely chose to hire contractors for a few select projects where it was either inexpensive or we could get something done really quickly and it was just money well spent. And the floors were one of them. We rolled up the carpet, super easy to just roll up the carpet and get it out like that. I think that took us all of like half an hour to get the carpet out of the house. And then this is what we were left with. It had been glued down, and this glue is just this like really mucky thing. And we had talked to our finishing contractor that was going to sand and refinish this. It was a long time ago. I think they did it for $2 a square foot, which is a pretty good price. We're getting time to have to redo our floors now, and I think the more updated price that we got today is like $3 a square foot. So, it wasn't. This was a much harder job to remove the glue and stuff. So they actually used this this like crazy sandpaper, and I saved a piece because I've never seen sandpaper like this before or since. And I think this was I think it's like a 4-grit sandpaper. It's not sandpaper. It's like specks of gravel or something closer to that. And this, what we normally use is like 80 or 120 grit or sometimes way finer. But this is 4-grit sandpaper if I'm remembering that right. So and they were just like, I don't know, they were gumming up the bottoms of their shoes and everything. It was a battle for them. But the results. We were really happy with it. We found the living room and dining room, the public spaces were this really beautiful red oak. The private areas, the kitchen, hallway, bedrooms, it was species we think is yellow birch. That's been the consensus. I think we got one person who thought it was hickory, but it's just this. We think it's birch. So we had a couple lessons learned on that one. One is, well, I've still got this slide up. On the advice of the flooring contractor, we decided not to remove this base shoe that goes around our trim around the baseboard. And he thought he'd get his edge sander right up to the edge of that, and he did a pretty good job. But there's still just like with glued down carpet, there's just still a little muck that was left. And I really wish we had just pulled up that base shoe. It wouldn't have taken too long to pull it up. We could have just slapped it back in at the end. I think we could have salvaged that pretty easy. So definitely, I'm going to do that next time when we get these redone. Another thing, I should mention too, we for finish, we ended up going with, I think it was 1 coat. So this is polyurethane. I think we did 1 coat oil, 2 coats of water-based poly. and the oil really brings out the color. And we just really loved the way that looked. But the water base is more of a durable finish for the final coats. And so we've gotten about 13 years out of that, 14 years now. So super happy. There's a few high traffic areas that are only just finally starting to wear down. So we're going to do the same thing again. So most of our house was pretty straightforward. The floors, the kitchen, this thing was a bear. I mentioned earlier the layers and the floor. I don't know how clear these photos are to see what's going on, but we'll start on the right here. This was like the vinyl or linoleum or something that was like the finished floor when we bought the house. That was on a 1/4-inch plywood underlayment on top of some old floor tiles, this like green speckled stuff. Don't know what age that's from, but it must have been like 50s or 60s or something. It was not original, because that was on top of some kind of like burlap faced underlayment or something. I don't really know what that was. And then that seemed to be like delaminating and sticking to what was the original birch wood floors underneath that, which then of course is on top of subfloor. So it was just a lot of layers. This 1/4-inch underlayment that was stapled on top of this tile. The staple spacing, they just went crazy with the staples. They're like 1 inch on center, and these staples, I don't know, they were at least 1 inch long. And so I think me and my dad pulled out those staples, and I think we probably spent a cumulative of like 20 to 30 hours just ripping off these layers, pulling staples. For a long time we saved the staples because we just had this like really bizarre attachment to them, and I think it was like 2 like ice cube tray full, like, you know, the big, it was just like it was thousands of staples. Anyway, it was only a 10 by 10 space. It's just I feel I'm still scarred by this, if you can't tell, but I think we would do the same thing here. But I think the lesson learned with the staples was we weren't sure what to do with the holes they went all the way through into the birch floor, and the flooring guys, they're like, just leave it, don't fill the holes, don't try, because it'll just stick out and like look worse in the end. And I wanted to share that was actually really good advice. I'm really glad that we didn't try to do anything. Like you can still see like these 2, like they almost look like little teeth marks or something, like every so often, but it just kind of adds to the character. It's if you can't even really see it unless you look super hard for it, but it is there. And I don't know, we've just, I guess, rolled with it, and I would do the same thing again. I wouldn't try to fill those holes or anything. So so that was also really worthwhile. I think a lot of people shy away from wood floors in wet spaces like kitchens, but yeah, it's been really good. Actually, the bigger issue with kitchen is that it's high traffic. You spend 2-3 meals prepping food, and that's like the thing that wears down the floors a lot. So the other like really high value project that we did very early on, similar to the floors, was the ceilings. I mentioned the ceiling tiles earlier, and so here's a glimpse of that. And so this is I guess more of a story about touching plaster and getting back towards the original plaster surfaces for walls too, not just ceilings. But we really didn't like the tile ceiling, so we started tearing it up, seeing what was behind it. We did have plaster. This tile that had been added, it was stapled up to these furring strips. I think that's a pretty typical cover job. And what we had found was that the plaster ceilings were pretty badly cracked. You know, for us, what the issue was is that the ceiling joists are actually they're undersized, and then they built out the attic to be a habitable space, so it was seeing additional floor loads that it really wasn't meant for. The way the roof is framed, actually the roof is framed down and bears down onto the ceiling, and all these extra loads makes these joists deflect, which might be fine, except that plaster does not deflect very much, as much as the wood framing does. So it cracks. And also even worse, like the plaster, the way it's attached to the lath through the keys just break off. And so the plaster is not secure to the lath anymore. So our first step was really to get a bunch of these plaster washers, and it's you can get these from hardware stores. There's just these little things. I don't know how easy it is to see, but they're about the size of a quarter, about 7/8 of an inch in diameter. They have a little tooth to them. They work with a drywall screw, and you just basically screw the plaster, refasten it at least into the lath boards. It's better to get directly into the framing wherever it's possible. And so we kind of did a little bit of both of that. But we basically just re-secured all the cracks. These pictures don't really capture how many of these we use. We use several hundred of these plaster washers in these spaces that are like maybe 12 by 12 or so. And after we got the plaster secure, we had a nice firm surface that we could go off of. The pink stuff you see is a plaster bonding agent that we rolled on, and then we applied this fiberglass mesh. It's just like drywall tape, like the fiberglass mesh type, but it comes in these like 3-foot wide rolls, and it's slightly sticky, and you just apply that right to the ceiling. And then our plaster system from there, we actually just used, if I'm remembering right, I think we did 2 base coats of like setting type joint compound. I think we just used like 180-minute working time stuff. And we kind of, that embeds into the mesh. And that works as a system that bonds to the existing plaster really well, and provides a base coat that should be pretty crack resistant. And then we did a finish coat of sanded veneer plaster over the top of that, and that's worked out really well for us. It matches the existing plaster texture really well. It's been 13-14 years now, and no new cracks or anything, so it's held up much better than the patch jobs that they tried doing somewhere along the way, where you could see they taped it, and I think they tried to do the thing where they fill it with caulk, and it must not have looked right to them either, so they covered up with a tile. But so far so good with our fix to this system. The reason you see 2 paint colors there is we decided to re-hang the picture rail, which used to be right up at the ceiling. We decided to hang it below the crown moldings of the windows. So we kind of strayed away from the original design of the house that way, but we didn't understand the picture rail above the windows. Like we weren't going to hang pictures above the windows, only in between. So so that's why that you see those 2 colors like that. So that's, I think, everything I wanted to say on the ceiling. So if you see other resources on how to do this out there, that's what worked for us. So those are a couple like relatively smaller projects for us. They brought a lot of value, a lot of good results on the interior. Actually our biggest project, it involves a lot of different facets of the house. It's a project I wasn't really sure if I wanted to share in this presentation, because I'm worried that it might scare some people away from these types of houses, but it's been our biggest project, so I really couldn't skip over it. It's been our longest project. It's been our most expensive project, and it's one that we're really not like fully finished with right now. So that speaks for something too. We knew we had aluminum siding over wood. We really wanted to bring back the wood siding. We didn't know what we had until we started tearing off. So we started with a sample wall. We started taking off aluminum siding, and I think we were kind of discouraged by the results, because we found that they had really damaged the existing wood siding when they installed the aluminum. This was like a little drip edge above the water table trim. They'd hacked up the little drip edges that are above the head casing on the windows. You can kind of see the paint was really water damaged. The aluminum siding actually like traps water to the siding, and that just makes the paint peel off. The wood was not doing well. You can see that somewhere along the way they had insulated the wall cavities with dense packed cellulose, and so these are all the holes from that. And we were a little bit discouraged by that, but we wanted to keep going forward. You can see the shingles deteriorating in this photo. Here's a look at the inside second floor. Originally, when we bought the house, this is like halfway through demo or so it doesn't show you everything, but they had added this second floor bathroom. This height at this like front wall where the door was, this is maybe like 5'6" or something, to kind of give you some scale. This was like really packed in underneath the roof line. So just not a real livable space. I said earlier, we had some structural issues up here, plumbing issues. What else? Maybe one of the big things, so this is only, the roof rafters are only 2x4s, which are very small for the span length in our climate. So they had retrofitted insulation. It was not enough insulation. It also doesn't allow for ventilation of the roof, so we were having ice dam problems and water infiltration. So all kinds of design issues with these aspects of this house. So we came up with a plan. We decided we would just do a redo. We would kind of redo everything. And we started by jacking up the porch. The porch was never given a proper foundation, so it was settling. You can kind of see, this is actually a look before we started jacking it up. You can kind of see the curve in the siding. We think this had settled, it was more than 6 inches. It was quite a bit. And so we cut a hole in the concrete. We threw in some steel. We jacked it up on some cribbing. Used these braces to hold it up while we were redoing the framing. And so that was really step one. We needed to do this first because we needed to re-straighten all the framing up here, the roof line. We just wanted to get this back to like a proper baseline so that we could proceed with the rest of our reconstruction. We redid all the structure we could. These are the, I guess, the ceiling joists of the first floor or the floor joists of the second floor, depending on how you look at it. So we sistered everything. We reframed the headers around the chimney opening and the stairwell opening, which were not properly done, and so the house was sagging around, especially around the chimney. Just was not detailed very well with the framing. This gave us a chance to redo all the electrical, rerun proper like plumbing vents and those kinds of things. So it was a really good way to retrofit of what houses really need properly. And then we just we hired a contractor to really we just did a complete demo. We did a total tear off of all the aluminum siding. We did total tear off of our roof, and all we were left with for a little bit was just this single story box. This was one of those things though we hired out just to get the framing done really quickly, and the crew that we hired, the contractor was they were just super good, and they whipped this up, we actually increased the roof pitch a little bit. Previously it's 812, we're up to a 1012, so that increased the overall height at the peak by about 2 feet. We added a dormer for a proper bathroom. It brings everything up to code up there, which is pretty unusual for a 1920s house. But this is more of like a total remodel, or almost like an addition at this point. There's one thing that we actually got a variance on in our permit, which is has to do with stairway width. We kept our original stairway from the first floor to the second floor. It was originally built with a 33-inch width. Code requires 36 inches, and they granted us the variance based on that we would install interconnected smoke detectors throughout the house to as a kind of a trade-off for the safety there. And then, we decided while we're at it, we're gonna go a super insulated envelope. We did this this roof and wall system. Here's some pictures of the roof. This is going to be, this will be R70. What you're looking at is, so we had, from the previous picture, they framed up the roof, and then we actually added a second framing structure on top of that to give it additional insulation thickness. But the first picture you saw with the original framing, that's really the structural system. This is in this picture, that's really the structure, and then we just add additional thickness for insulation. Walls also super insulated. We tore off all the wood siding because it was not salvageable. We got back to the sheathing. We found that some of the original plank sheathing, it was not providing the structural capacity on the wall that is meant for shear strength. So we reinforced certain areas with plywood sheathing. And then we gave it a peel and stick air and weather barrier. This is a wall system that we learned a lot about. It's known as the remote wall. There's some resources available out there if you do like a Google search on remote wall. It's this concept that's been done up in Alaska a little bit, and so we just spent a lot of time learning about the remote wall system, and there's some other good resources out there too. If you learn about that, and if you do some research on Joe Stiebrick and Building Science Corporation, and just learn as much as you can about wall systems and building science, that'll set you up for like 2 years of nighttime reading. And that's kind of what we did. So we actually put 4 inches of foam insulation on top of this air and moisture barrier that you see here. That's why the window frames are now, they're bucked out with that frame. We did triple pane windows, but we tried to match the original 3/1 light design that originally the windows had. We installed furring strips to fasten the siding to. This is all finger jointed cedar wood siding, all new. And the furring strips also act as a drainage plane to make the wood siding hopefully last longer. Everything's back primed and primed for longevity.
Andy, I'm going to interrupt you and cut you off.
Okay.
But I'm going to open it up that after Natalie and Mark present that you can tell us what your other slides are about so that we can still learn about more.
That's really all I have. Anyway,
good.
So I'm sorry for the time, but yes, that's really what I have.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to have Mark speak for us.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, Andy, can you stop sharing your screen? We can hear you, Mark.
All right, good. All right, let's try this. And, all right, how's that?
It's great.
All right, my name is Mark Zettler. I am an architect and developer in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I own Zettler Design Studio. and I'm going to talk a little bit about where to find some historic resources for researching things about your home, and go through my most recently completed development, which is the Buzz's Bikes building, the former Masonic Temple and Exchange State Bank. So with that, let's get started here. I am a licensed architect in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska, but I'm based in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Over 90% of my work is on historic buildings, whether they're homes, commercial, or government. And I also do some development. We recently completed the Buzz's Bikes building, and then my other group is also working on the former Fire Station number 5, which was the Southside Senior Center until last year. And so I'm going to go through Buzz's Bikes really quick here, and just some challenges and some good things. When you're looking at a historic building, there's always going to be ups and downs, pluses and minuses. The building had been vacant. The north side had been vacant for over a decade when we purchased the building. The plumbing pipes, the electrical, mechanical, everything had been stripped and scrapped from the building. There was no heating, cooling. There was no plumbing. It was sawed off right at the basement wall, and there was no electrical panel or anything on the north half. And the south half, where Buzz's Bikes was, had some of that. They still had some electrical, but the plumbing wasn't good, and the heating and cooling was really kind of on its last legs when we took over the building as well. Part of the structure actually collapsed a few years before we purchased it. The back end of the building, about the back 40 or 50 feet, it had been leaking for years. People had gone through and surveyed the building. You could see daylight coming through the building back even in 2009. And then somewhere in the winter of 2011, 2012, they got a lot of snow. The roof collapsed, fell onto the second floor, knocked the second floor joists loose, which in turn collapsed onto the first floor. And so the back end of the building had to be taken down. There was major roof leaks with the rest of the building. So there was rot up on the roof structure throughout, and most of the windows were either broken or missing. But on the good side, it was a beautiful building, architecturally significant. It was the most substantially built building in North La Crosse. Very good structure. Otherwise, there's no way that that building could have withstood the abuse that it had taken, and its great visibility. It's 2 blocks from the Loggers Stadium, to kind of, for people who don't know where that is, it's right on Highway 53 going north. And a lot of the historic fabric was still there. There was a lot of trim left. There was tin ceiling still existent in the building. And we actually discovered some historic flooring as well, which was really good. And the city put their blessing on it. They really wanted the building to be saved instead of torn down. And the existing layout worked well with what we were proposing. We ended up putting 2 apartments on the second floor, and then the first floor we rented to a salon and wellness center. And where the back of the building collapsed, we put some off-street parking, which was also a plus. So I'm just going to go through some before and afters here. The before, I had a couple pictures before the building collapsed in the back. So you can see this part was the part that collapsed and was taken down. And when we purchased it, it was just this chunk of the building. We ended up putting new windows on the second floor. The windows that were there were so far gone, you could stick your finger through the wood. It was that rotten. And then the windows on the north side on second floor were gone prior to our purchase. It was all blocked up with concrete block. Storefront was gone. We did restore the windows on the first floor on the bank side. So we did keep the wood windows and took the glass out, cleaned it, put new putty in, new glazing points, used wood epoxy and things like that to solidify the remnants of the historic building fabric. And we also did quite a bit of masonry restoration on the building, cleaning, tuck pointing. We added some extra stitch ties, which are stainless steel kind of auger bits that tie brick back together where there are cracks, where it's loose. So we put a significant amount of effort into restoring the outside of the building. And then on the inside, I kind of divided this up north half, south half. The south half, which is right on the corner, was the Exchange State Bank. You could see all the little banking rooms. You'd go in there and close the door and write your deposit ticket, come back out, and then go to the teller window. Tin ceiling was still there. It was really rough shape because of the roof leaks. Some of it had rusted all the way through. There was carpet and other flooring over the top of the existing. And then the north half, which was the masons on the second floor. The first floor was a grocery store back in the 1800s. And this door kind of separated the grocery store from going into where the Masonic Hall went up to the second floor. And then there was another stair coming down here. And when we were done, the salon moved into the south half. You could see that we were able to restore the hardwood flooring. There was tile where this was actually where the teller line was. And so there was tile there, but over 90% of it was gone. So we didn't have enough to bring it back. So we just ended up putting a colored concrete topping over that because the grout was still there, but the tiles were missing. Then on the north half, we reused the pocket doors and then just basically cleaned everything up, found hardwood flooring. We did have an asbestos contractor come through and remove the flooring on this half because it was 9x9 tile, which did test positive for asbestos. So that's something that you'll want to look at and possibly get tested if you find materials that might contain hazardous substances in them. Second floor was in equally rough shape. There was probably more water damage up here than there was on first floor. Some of them had carpet, some of them also had asbestos tile that we had to pay a contractor to come in and remove up here. And basically we kept the layout very similar to how it was, but we just opened up, we selectively took out sections of walls, but we left a lot of the original walls, at least in part, to kind of keep the essence of the space. But this photo here is looking at the exact same location as this photo. So we took part of this wall out, turned that into the kitchen with a kind of a breakfast nook. And then we took this wall out. There was just a single door here when we started. Open it up and you can kind of see the turret room. Then on the north half, this was the Masonic Hall. So it was very closed in and divided up. The Masons were extremely secretive. This was the public hall where non-Masons could come. And then you'd go through, there was a vestibule here. And then the door behind here actually had a slot on the door with like a little peephole. And if you weren't a Mason, they would not let you into the back of the building. So it's kind of cool. But we ended up kind of a similar concept where we opened this up a little bit, but we tried to keep a lot of the existing doorways and trim and everything and just sort of fixed up the space. Hardwood floor was beautiful on this side as well. There's 15-foot ceilings in this unit, so they really had a very nice space. Unfortunately, the meeting hall was in the very back, and only about a half of that survived. The rest of it was in the part that collapsed. But we were able to rescue what remained, and so this unit really turned out well. I guess after that, we just kind of fixed up the site. We did add insulation to the roof when the roof leaked, so we got that up to increase the energy efficiency. And all the new windows that we put in have double pane glass, whereas the existing ones were single pane glass. I'm going to talk about some basic kind of deterioration mechanisms that you're probably going to run into when you're working on an older home or commercial building. Most people have wood in their homes, whether it's the entire home or just the floor joists or the interior walls. You can run into, there's rot, fire damage. I think a boiler or something blew up in this basement on this building, and you can see all the charring on the joists. And it was kind of a cobbled up repair looking at this because they had sistered some 2x6s to these 2x12s. Can't see it because they're on the back side on this photo. But it really didn't do a whole lot of good because the floor was still slumped down about 3 inches in the middle of the span. And then there's dry rot and wet rot, depending on water. And this, they had sistered joists to this previously. As you can see, 2-3 inches of the bottom of the oldest joists are completely gone. And there's also termites in lacrosse. So if you see any of that, just you may need to add structural members to the existing to stiffen up and support the building. Another mechanism is rust jacking, like if you have a steel beam or an angle and it starts to rust expands compared to steel, so then it starts putting pressure on the materials around it. And in this case, the rust expanded enough where it popped the brick off the building right here. And this is at the corner of a window. And so that's a very common deterioration mechanism. Rising damp, if you've got a lot of water in the ground or snow sits up against the building, it will wick up into the masonry. And then when it freezes, water expands, and then you get another deterioration where the brick can crack, spall. Here it's just powdering from repeatedly being wet year after year after year. And a lot of these bricks, this is from Buzz's Bikes as well, a lot of these bricks had to be pulled out and replaced. Windows, you can, if the glass breaks, the wood rots, they're boarded up sashes, there's always some things that need to be replaced or restored. If you are doing a tax credit project, and I'll touch more on this later, the National Park Service and the State Historical Society are going to want you to keep your original windows whenever possible, unless they are really, really bad or completely gone. For energy efficiency, they will usually allow you to put storm windows that are appropriate with your single pane glazed windows. So you can increase energy efficiency that way. Roof, whether you have membrane, tile, shingles, the roof is usually the first thing on the building that's going to wear out. This is a rubber roof, probably 30 to 40 years old. These are holes that you could stick 2 or 3 fingers in and completely loose. It was raining inside the building during rainstorms on this project. Clay tile roof, one of your best roofs you can have, in my opinion. But this roof here is almost 100 years old, and it's still got the original tile, but some of them are cracked and breaking. And this roof is probably ready for what's called a lift and relay, where you take the shingles up, you set them aside, you get rid of the broken ones, you bring in a few new ones, put new underlayment down, and then you put the shingles back on the roof. Concrete has some similar decay mechanisms, especially if there's rebar in it. So this is in a basement, and sidewalk salt and water off the sidewalk got down between the face of the building and the sidewalk, rusted the rebar, the bar expanded and popped the concrete off on this beam. So this beam, the rebar was shot and the concrete, and this all needed to be carved out and then new concrete installed to fix it. So that was not an easy fix, but it does happen. I'm going to go through some real quick areas to research if you're looking for your home. Obviously, a lot of home repairs are expensive. And so if you can get financial assistance to help offset those costs, a lot of times it makes taking care of your home more financially feasible. I always start out with asking people to check the national, state, and local historic registers for 2 reasons. Number one, Wisconsin has a homeowner's historic tax credit, which can cover up to 25% of your qualified rehabilitation costs. It doesn't include things like additions or site work or things like that, and they've got a list on their website. But it can be quite helpful if you're restoring windows, you're putting in, updating your heating and cooling or your electrical or your plumbing. It can make a significant impact into how much you actually the project's going to cost. Local registers, you do need to check with your local ordinance, and La Crosse does have a preservation commission. Other cities do too. You may have to get your home project reviewed by them if you have a historic home and you start out just trying to determine if your home is listed as a historic structure or not, and then what register is it on, and do you need to present to that local preservation commission. The La Crosse Public Library Archives is a really great source for finding information about your home. A lot of the things I've listed on here are available at the archives, and talk to Jenny about that if you've got questions. They have city directories, and I believe they have city directories scanned and online up into the early 1920s, so that if you're worried about going to the library with COVID, you can just check from anywhere you've got an internet connection and look up directories. You can see if your address is listed If it was, then your house was probably there by that date. And then you can also check to see who lived there. So you might, maybe a former mayor, or maybe somebody else lived there, a lumber baron, you don't know. Kind of fun to look at. There's deeds. Tap records are a very good indicator on when the home had either a major renovation or when it was first connected to city water. And those are also available at the archives. Tax records, you may need to go to the county to look for some of those. And building permit history, you would ask the inspections department. Newspapers are kind of spread among various sources. The archive room has some. UW La Crosse Special Collections has some. The fire insurance maps are also on some of these. The fire insurance maps for La Crosse have been scanned and are online at the Wisconsin Historical Society website up into, I believe, the early 1920s. And then if you also want to ask if you know who the former owner was, or if you know family members of the former owner, sometimes asking them, you can find historic photos or a diary or something that will have information on things that were done to your home. Postcards are another thing. People used to walk, there used to be professional photographers that would go around and they would take pictures of different buildings, homes included, and then try to sell those to the family. So you may have a postcard of your home and you may not even know it. But a lot of those are available online through different dealers and antique stores like the Antique Mall downtown. They have a lot of postcards, and it's just something you got to look for. And sometimes you get lucky and you find something. And I also wanted to say that the University of Wisconsin La Crosse Special Collections has thousands and thousands of historic photos of La Crosse and the surrounding area. And it's a great resource to try and find different historic views of various buildings. They have a number of homes that are photographed. They also have a lot of the photographs from La Crosse's historic intensive surveys. So those photos aren't as old as something from the 1800s, early 1900s, but you may be able to go back to the 70s or 80s and still have a picture of your home, and maybe it still had a historic feature on it at that point, that before a renovation removed it. And this is an example of a Sanborn map. This is downtown La Crosse. And you can see this is color coded based on construction type, because this map was set up for fire insurance purposes. So pink buildings are masonry. They're usually solid brick walls. They can have wood floors or wood roofs. Blue is stone, so a lot of those have limestone walls. Yellow is wood frame, so that's your standard 2x4, 2x6, and it doesn't differentiate between the construction types, whether it's a balloon frame or a platform frame. And that's that change kind of occurred around 1900. And then there is the brown and the green, which are more special construction types. One of those is usually steel construction. The other one is concrete construction. But as you can see, most of downtown was brick. And then most of the homes were wood frame. And then there are some hybrids like this one right here. If it's yellow, it's a wood frame building, but it's got a pink liner on the outside. So that means they put a 4-inch layer of brick on it. So it's just a brick veneer with a wood frame. So that's kind of how you read these Sanborn maps. And the 1906 Sanborn map covered most of La Crosse. I think there's 60 or 70 sheets of drawings that go block by block and show the different houses and other buildings. So very important. You can also see when additions were added to your home, because they updated these maps every 10 to 20 years. And so this is a very valuable source if you can't find any pictures, to see what part of your home was built and when, because these maps were fairly accurate. And I'm going to talk a little bit about different sources for your resources for your rehab project. The National Park Service has published the preservation briefs. I believe there's 50 or so different briefs now, and each one focuses on a different building material. The first one or two are on masonry, one's on tuck pointing, one's on cleaning. They have one for windows. They've got one for roofing. So basically you figure out what material you're working on with your building, And then you can download these for free and just kind of read through them. And they've got very good advice for some do's and don'ts with treating historic building materials properly. And then if you're going to do a tax credit project like that 25% homeowners tax credit for the state of Wisconsin, you'll want to go through and look at the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. That is what your project will be evaluated on when it goes to the Wisconsin Historical Society for their tax credit review. And that one, there's 4 different treatments. The Historical Society is going to look on the rehabilitation standard. There's one for recreation, like say the building burns down, restoration, which would take it back to a certain period in time, preservation, which just kind of keeps it in its current state and stops any further decay, and then the rehabilitation it's more flexible than some of the other ones. So they realize that you're still living in the home, you need a new bathroom or updated kitchen features, and so that's why they use that standard. And then the Historical Society is going to be one of your places where not only you will talk to them if you're going to do a tax credit project and they're going to review your project, they also have what's called the AHI, which is the Architecture and History Index, where they've got thousands and thousands of addresses of buildings all across the state in their database, and they have information on file, and they do update them. La Crosse just finished updating theirs a couple years ago, but it was like 20, 25 years in between updates. So sometimes they're not completely accurate, but they will say whether or not the building is on the state and national register of historic places on that property record. And the search is a little fussy. Like say you live on 500 Fifth Avenue. Well, if you type in 500, 5TH AVE, it may come up, it may not. Or if you spell out Avenue, it all depends on the person who did the data entry, how they typed it in. So sometimes you need to kind of do the search 2 or 3 different times, just tweaking your spelling a little bit to see if that property record is going to come up. And I mentioned the tax credit program. And then I do like looking at a couple magazines in particular. Old House Journal has some very good articles on maintaining your home, traditional building, and arts and crafts homes. There are other ones, but those are the 3 main ones that I look at. And then there are some very good product manufacturers that have started remaking things for historic homes. Vintage Hardware has a lot of door hardware, cabinet hardware, lighting, things like that. Rejuvenation is primarily light fixtures if you want to get a retro or a period light fixture. House of Antique Hardware is another one. They have a lot. They have hardware, they have lighting. They actually still make the old push button light switches. So if you want to go completely back to how the house looked originally, then sources like that. And a lot of these manufacturers are listed in the periodicals that I mentioned above, like Traditional Building has links to material suppliers that have a lot of these historic things. And if you can't find anything there, you go to the Architectural Salvage Warehouses. The Twin Cities has a number of good ones. There's not so much here in La Crosse. I also do a fair amount of research on projects looking at period catalogs. Like I've got the 1911 Segelke and Cole House catalog. That was the big door and window manufacturer here in La Crosse. There's Sears catalogs, Sweets catalogs, and a lot of these you can go online for and find. I'm a member of the Association for Preservation Technologies, the APTI. They've got over 10,000 historic catalogs scanned in that you can look at. So that's a great resource. And they've got it broken up by product type. They've got lighting, they've got doors, they've got metals, things like that. And then social media groups. I mean, are you on the Frank Lloyd Wright page or something like that? So with a grain of salt though, there's a lot of very knowledgeable people on there, but there's also people that pretend to know a lot and they may or may not. So kind of use social media at your own risk. And my contact information if anybody's got any questions. And with that, I guess I will turn it back to Jenny. And thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Thanks. Jenny gave me the go-ahead to just move right into my slides. So thanks, Andy and Mark. So hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I will share my screen here, and for our last little portion of the evening, let's see here. So I know some of you attended the first session in this series a couple weeks ago, a presentation I gave called "Why Old is Green," and so I'll reintroduce myself for those of you and share a little bit about my background. I work for an organization called Rethos, which is a regional nonprofit, and we're all about community development and saving old buildings. And I manage our education program. So these, again, were photos from the last time I showed, but good times, right? Before COVID, I spent a lot of time hosting rehab and maintenance workshops for homeowners, property owners who are interested in learning skills they could take home with them. Our classes, oh, I should also say too, I'm based in St. Paul. Rethos has offices in Duluth, Little Falls, St. Paul, and Winona. And so I travel all over to host classes like this. And so much of my job is just connecting people to the experts who, like Joe here, our window guy, one of our window guys, so that homeowners really feel confident that they have connections to contractors and materials, supplies, skills, anything that will help them tackle their home maintenance projects or rehab projects. So, of course, this year, or last year, have taken a step back from in-person things and try to get a good sense of the virtual world of rehab education. And there's so much out there. The internet is massive, and plenty of good information and plenty of bad information. So I'm here to share some of our favorites, favorite resources that you can hop onto on another screen right away. And these aren't just my own personal favorites, but things that have been recommended to me by some of the experts who we work with, and homeowners who have expressed their gratitude for such resources existing. So I also will say that I'm going to show a bunch of scenes from different websites or videos or whatever, but I'll have a list, one slide at the end with a list of all of these items with links. So feel free to, you don't have to scramble to take notes if you care to take notes, but or remember these for the future. But you can take a photo or screenshot at the end with everything that I will have mentioned. So we'll start with the big one. This is a favorite of mine: Exceedingly Comprehensive Guide to Home Improvement for First-Time Homeowners. And it truly is exceedingly comprehensive. And this is a great start. It's incredibly thorough. It has these, sort of big bucket items that, if you're tackling a big project, it likely falls into one of these categories. And here's just a scene, how to choose a contractor. They have really nice bite-sized suggestions, and then filled in with expert quotes, even homeowners sharing their own thoughts. It's all searchable. So while it's incredibly long and thorough, you can search and find exactly, what you need to kind of trigger or get you started for a variety of different projects. I actually, this came to my attention because I'm a big fan of a group called Brick and Beam Detroit, and they actually manage a program similar to Rethos's education program, specific to Detroit. And it was actually created in response to the foreclosure crisis, the late aughts, where thousands of Detroit homes were vacant and in pretty decent condition, but they needed some love after a few years of vacancies. And so Brick and Beam sort of emerged to inspire folks to purchase these homes, for often for $1,000 or less, but they really needed that education and the connection to experts to help them through some of the rehab and maintenance projects that were required. So they have a massive rehab resources page on their website, and they're often a go-to place for me. Not everything is, necessarily Detroit specific. Some of their resources, like these walkthrough checklists or, how-to guides, are things that they have created in-house or alongside some contractors or experts. Other times they'll link to other, virtual outside resources like that exceedingly comprehensive guide. So, and what I like about it too is that everything is tagged. All these different articles are tagged, so you can search, you can, find everything you need to find about a plaster project or whatever. And it's really easy to use. Another thing I really love about their website is this Brag Your Rehab map. So again, Detroit specific, but as Andy said, like when he first started, he bought his home and he's just looking around at what other homeowners are up to, like what projects are they doing, how are they tackling it. This is like a library of homeowner projects, and so you can click on any one of these pins and see, how did somebody else go about, a roofing repair, or, how much did it cost for this square footage? You can share that kind of information. It's nice to have it localized so that you can get ideas for contractors or suppliers or that sort of thing. But just having other people's, stories for inspiration and, sharing of info or resources is super helpful, I think. I tried to start something for Rethos called On the Map, and I rolled it out, the whole idea, right before COVID hit. And so momentum died pretty quickly. But we have a few stories on our website right now, and I hope that we can sort of revive it so that we get enough to populate a map for our region. And some of these stories are pretty fun. This porch transformation is a woman who lives in Minneapolis who took a handful of classes from Rethos around window repair and rotted wood, and did this whole beautiful redo of her front porch. So again, it's kind of fun just to, whether it's for inspiration or actual guidance on your project, to share those kinds of stories. I'm a big fan of the Craftsman blog. This is often like a go-to place I send people. So it's run by a guy named Scott Seidler out of Austin, Texas. And he has a big presence on social media and on the internet. He's pretty well known, I guess, in the old home rehab world, gives lots of talks and videos and stuff like that. And his blog is similarly really easy to use, searchable. He has a nice, like, easy conversational style. And so it's easy to understand. He breaks things down really nicely. And some stuff is, just an introduction to different, building materials or types. Others are, how more thorough how-to guides. He has a few videos. So this is a nice one about, window repair. He has, this is actually a video. Again, the link is near the end of my slides, but this isn't on his website. It was something he did for another group, but this is him, Scott, of course. And it's a full hour that he walks through window restoration. So if you need, you can read the blog, get the bullet points. You can watch him demonstrate some basic repairs. He's also holding his book. I think it's called Old Windows Made Easy. So you can get the thicker description that sort of walks you through some of these projects. Take your pick of how you want to learn about it. But yeah, he's a pretty great resource and massive blog archive. You can find nearly everything there. Speaking of windows, so I talked a lot about windows in my last presentation too, and sometimes, if you're game to fix up your old windows, there's plenty of these resources here to get you started. But I also, I'm not local, right? But I wanted to just point you towards if there are, you need to find an expert, and this goes for everything, I guess, beyond just windows, but the Window Preservation Alliance maintains a directory of window restorationists. It's by no means comprehensive, but it's sometimes a good place to start. The Minnesota Historical Society has a directory that is regional. It's not state specific. And of course, a lot of people cross state lines, especially when you live in a place like La Crosse or Winona. I'm not sure, please chime in if the Wisconsin Historical Society has something similar. I didn't find anything in my brief search, but I'm from actually a town just north of Milwaukee, so I'm familiar with some folks on that end of the state. And then in La Crosse, I know, so David Wadsworth showed up to the last session and mentioned that his company based out of Decorah does some projects. I know a couple of folks here are associated with the Preservation Alliance of La Crosse, and perhaps Mark also has the right connections. And with a lot of these projects, I think that most people find a lot of success when you ask your neighbors and it's word of mouth, right? I know there are some like neighborhood specific social media groups, like Mark mentioned too, that might be a good place to start. I also have found, at least in my experience, that old home contractors, experts, often work together, right? So if you have someone coming out to your house for a plaster repair project or something, or a floor refinishing, they might know somebody who does window repair or who does, historic house painting or something. And that's always a good place to go for recommendations as well. Structure Tech is another blog that I really love. Structure Tech is a home inspection company based in the Twin Cities. And if you're thinking more about building systems and the guts of your house, these people are true experts. And again, massive blog, searchable. You can find answers to a lot of your like ugly, gross questions about some things that might be wrong with your house, or even just to get a better sense of our homes as systems, right? So I like his the article about preventing ice dams. This is a really thorough explanation of like, why do these even happen in the first place, and how do we prepare for this possibility? What can we do to prevent them? I also highly recommend following Structure Tech on Facebook. You'll obviously, get updates about their latest blog posts, or pull stuff out from the archives. But they're pretty funny too. They'll post these Wordless Wednesdays posts of like ridiculous things that they see in home inspections, like this 3/4 door in a bathroom. So anyway, if you need a little entertainment, that's definitely a place I suggest. I mentioned also in my last presentation about the possibilities of deconstruction and salvage. So not only where we're sourcing our materials from for a project, but where they're going if we're creating waste in projects too. And I learned that La Crosse's Habitat for Humanity has this awesome reclaim program, and perhaps some of you are more familiar with it than I am. But great for even larger remodels. They'll come and help you out and take some of the building material back to and put it back into use, either by selling at the restore or recycling it for some other purpose. And I saw somebody also had mentioned, I think Pete threw an architectural salvage place in the area into the chat too, which is a great place to go for material and fixtures. Home energy audits too. This is something that came up again in the last presentation. So, a great way to just make yourself a little bit more comfortable. It looked like that La Crosse, offers these for $350, which is decent, and often includes like new light bulbs, or low flow shower heads, or those sorts of things. All wrapped up in that, and then suggestions for some energy efficient upgrades or repairs that you can tackle on your own. The $50 for folks who fall into a lower income bracket too, so that's great for some financial assistance. Okay, here are the links. So I'll hold it here, and I can probably copy these or throw them in the chat if you care to take a photo or screenshot. This YouTube video is the one that I mentioned, the hour-long video of window restoration. I'll echo Mark's comment too about the Old Home Journal, and they have a lot of their Old House Online or Old Home Online. Their online journal has a ton of articles and videos as well, which is great. In addition to the print catalog. And I didn't show this, but From the Roof Down, it's kind of fun. It's definitely like an old website. It hasn't been updated. It looks kind of fun. But it literally takes you through from the roof down, parts of the home, considerations for, regular seasonal maintenance, potential areas that issues might crop up. So that's a pretty nice resource as well. These are the Reclaim program. I also am a fan of Build Reuse, which is actually a national organization that works on advocating for deconstruction and reuse of building materials. They're also trying to train up more people around to do deconstruction. I mean, that's part of the one piece of the puzzle, right, is to have enough folks in our communities who know how to do that and do it well. So that's a great organization. Lots of resources on their website as well, but one to keep an eye on. These are the Rethos website resources. So our rehab resources page includes several of the things that I've already mentioned, and it's always growing. It's living, and so I welcome any resource suggestions, favorite links, websites, whatever, so that it can sort of be a go-to place for folks to start their projects. We have a new page about renters resources, so things that renters should be aware of if they're renting in an older property, things that they can advocate for to their landlords as well, and then our on the map section with those stories that I described. Of course, those were all virtual things, but I wanted to pick out just 3. I mean, there's a billion things we could talk about, books and articles wise, around home rehab. The greenest building is the one already built. I also had brought this up in my last presentation, but if you go, you can just Google that title, but it really does sort of break down with hard data and the connections between building reuse and sustainability, and how if we truly invest in and take good care of our existing buildings, it is a key part of a sustainable, environmentally conscious future. The Old House Doctor, I was just talking to a dear friend who also is a preservationist, restorationist, and has taught classes for Rethos, and she said this is the funniest book about home rehab ever. So I'm taking her word for it. I've paged through the book, but she probably has read it cover to cover. So if you need that, if you need a little lighthearted home rehab. And then the Field Guide to American Houses, in terms of home style, architectural history, identifying your house and house parts. I've also heard that, I've literally heard this referred to as the Bible of that. So that's an excellent resource just to have on your shelf as well. I'll hold off. I know we got about 10 minutes left. So there's my email. Please do feel free to reach out. Any suggestions, any other ideas, would love to hear it. I hope some of these were new or helpful, but I'll pause for any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Andy, Mark, and Natalie. So between the 3 of them, we've heard a lot of different things, right? Maybe also some same things. But we've heard Andy with his case study of what his project looked like. Mark went through his project and then went through some local resources. And now we've got Natalie showing us some more general resources as well as more local ones. But now we're going to open it up for you all to ask us some specific questions. So we don't have much time, as Natalie said, but I still think we can have a nice conversation here. So I'll just start with, so you can feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask your question. And be able to explain yourself, or you can put it in the chat and I'll relay it to the panel. But the only question we have in here so far is for you, Andy. It was asked when you were showing the slide of your kitchen and the different layers being pulled up. And Mark asked if that had been tested for asbestos.
Actually, I think it was a long time ago, and I don't honestly remember. But we did test it. I just don't remember what the results were. I think we found that if I'm remembering right, I think the mastic, the adhesive used to adhere the wall tiles, we think that tested positive. On the floor, I you know I, I'm not, honestly I just don't remember, but I know that is definitely a possibility that some of that materials could definitely have asbestos in it. So it's definitely a good question.
We've got another question for you, Andy, from Pete. It says, when working on floors, remove the baseboard to confirm that the plaster, sheetrock, etc., are the only air barrier the house has. The only air barrier the house has to go all the way to the floor. Oh, he's sorry. So Pete did a presentation last week. Pete, do you want to maybe unmute yourself and explain this a little bit better? Maybe you're trying to say that you taught something a little bit different last week. If you can't, that's okay.
I think I know what he's getting at.
Do you? Good.
And I think, Pete, feel free to use I see your mic's not working, feel free to use the chat to clarify, but I think you're probably talking about the vapor barrier, the sheets of polyethylene that goes right behind the drywall. And that's a typical detail in cold climates to prevent from the vapor from inside your warm, humid house, getting through the wall and condensing inside the wall assembly. So I think Pete is just providing that tip that you can get there without, it's not a very invasive way to see in your wall.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Dave, I see that you've unmuted yourself. Did you want to?
Actually, yeah, I just had a question for Natalie, actually. I know I've actually met Natalie a few times in the past. I was a member of PAM for a few years. She might not recognize me with my beard, but I
actually do, now that you say it.
I actually just wanted to ask her about, I think one of the challenges with preservation or encouraging people to weatherize their homes or any of these topics rely a lot on the relationship between individuals and either local government, state government, creating a relationship and trying to find partners at the local or state level and government to create like a systemic, cultural change, for lack of a better word. So I was just curious in terms of what's going on the other side of the river in Minnesota, in terms of maybe if Natalie could talk to the challenges of trying to encourage city, county, state leaders to take historic preservation and sort of create a system where, we create these mechanisms that help, allow people to weatherize their homes or preserve their homes or whatever, to create a system that allows, there's individuals who have ideas like what Andy was showing, that he went and did all these things to his home, but how do we create these things at a broader scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like a lot of the time we're up against a lot of obstacles around like people's ideas about how difficult or useless or expensive it might be to rehab or just maintain older homes and older buildings. And I find a lot of the challenge just starts with that communication of the value, right? And so I try to attack it from a lot of different angles. Some people really glom onto the historical cultural value of older homes, older places. some people, their eyes light up when it comes to, the dollar signs, like, oh, we can, rehab and reinvest in this property and it can really become something, beneficial, or the environmental aspect, which is kind of what I was talking about, a couple weeks ago, the sustainability angle, right? Of reusing and keeping as much of our buildings and building materials in place. So to me, it's like always a struggle to find like where you can hook people or how you can convince people. And it's not always the same thing for everybody in a community.
Right.
At the same time, I think that the world of preservation has a few great tools that work for a few projects or a few people, like tax credits for the National Register. Minnesota does not have the same residential tax credits that Wisconsin does. But still, I think that the financial incentives or possibilities for, even tax abatements, like we used to have this old house, this old shop tax abatement program here in Minnesota that similarly would offer a financial incentive or for homeowners. So I think like there's just so much more that needs to just be like immediately or easily accessible and available for homeowners in particular to take advantage of. So it's not so daunting, so expensive, or like illogical sometimes to tackle a project. I feel like I could talk about that problem for a long time. So I don't know, it's a long conversation, but I hope that kind of got at it.
I was curious to see, I'm aware of what you and, I've kept in touch with Anders Christensen from, meeting you guys up in St. Paul and stuff. I was just curious because there does seem to be sort of different cultural problems from region to region. I come from the Boston area, and so it's common for me to, in hindsight, to think about growing up and living around buildings from the 1770s, that buildings, churches, brick roads and cobblestone roads and stuff that they preserved. And then I moved to the Midwest and it's like, oh, not everyone cares equally about those sort of things. People view their own histories differently. So yeah, so I was just curious to pick your brain about, what life was like up at St. Paul and Minneapolis.
Yeah, even there, it does depend on like neighborhood by neighborhood, right? And I know some people will be like, we go to Europe and why they save all their old buildings, everything's old there. It's like, yeah, that's just like normal, like we need to normalize it, not make it the exception to the rule, I guess. Yeah, I think I saw another chat or question in the chat pop up, so I want to make sure there's time for that too.
Yeah, another question from Pete. It seems like a pain, so this is for you, Andy. It seems like a pain to refurb an old home. Why do this? Perhaps to get a house at the ideal location for you, or to get a big lot in the city. What motivated you and Daniela to buy your house?
Maybe to refurb the old home. Maybe, like it says, it seems like a pain to do it, but I think that's I think that's part of our draw for us. It might not be for everybody. For us, I think we saw some good bones in the house, some good elements that we wanted to work around. We I don't know how you want to say it. We're picky. We have a very specific way that we want to live in our house, and so we were going to customize a house no matter what. I think so. I think we were appealed. We were drawn towards a house that was really quite a basic thing to work on. It was a clean slate in a lot of ways because there were so many things that were done poorly over the years and had to be redone anyways. I think we were more appealed towards that than finding something that was actually like in pristine shape and maybe didn't need any work. So I think that's one answer. I think we were also very drawn to the neighborhood was maybe the second thing that ties into that.
Thank you. So I know we're at 8 o'clock, so if anyone has to leave, that's okay. I had a few questions sent in to me from people who couldn't make it tonight. And I think I'm just going to end on this one question that I think all three of you could answer from different perspectives. And the question is, so for those of you who don't know, maybe Andy, you don't know this, or Natalie, but the city of La Crosse doesn't really have many programs for homeowners for assistance. There's things for people who want to do work on commercial buildings, but I talked to the city planner and he said that he's interested in providing those programs, just nothing has worked so far. And so the question is, what programs do you think would be most beneficial to homeowners for the local government to incorporate in their assistance programs? So maybe something practical. Could go a lot of routes.
Well, this is Mark. I think I would love to see the facade grant program that we have downtown, kind of a sister program to that for homes, where it's DMI used to call it the paint and fix up program. That's downtown Main Street, where if you want to make improvements to your home, you want to paint it, you want to fix the rotted wood, you want to fix up the windows or the roof, there is a certain amount of money available to that. Another thing that downtown has that is, to my knowledge, not available to residents is the upper floor loan, which it's a maximum of a $200,000 loan that is supposedly low interest. It depends on the borrowing rate at the time, but that goes towards helping people downtown convert the second, third, fourth floor of their commercial buildings to bring it back into use, whether that is for apartments or office or something like that. So I think that maybe there could be a spin-off of a low interest loan to people to rehab their homes as well.
Thank you, Mark. Andy or Natalie, do you have any ideas?
Well, I mean, my world is all in, education, right? And so the more that we can offer, communities, cities, neighborhoods can offer just connections to information, but also the experiences to actually try new things and try to break things down or make it less daunting is a big first step. I run into a lot of, first time home buyers who, just like, where do you even start? I don't know. I don't know. What do I need, like, in my toolbox? What do I need? Where do I go for this sort of stuff? And so just making that an approachable and accessible, thing to do is to me a really valuable, I don't know, piece of it. But the financial aspect is huge too. I love that upper floor loan program. That's bringing that over to Minnesota.
Yeah, we actually use that to do Buzz's Bikes. That's covered a big chunk of our financing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One other thing is, I'm wondering, I know PAL has been working on a demolition ordinance draft to present to the city. So Natalie, I don't know if you've got, I know you mentioned Portland in your first talk. If you've got information on that, we'd love to have it for the deconstruction ordinance.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I'll reach out. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, I will end it on that note for some hopeful future programs for our local homeowners to utilize. Thank you all for coming. And thank you, Andy and Natalie and Mark. I hope to see you all next week. We have one more left in the series. Next week is going to be it's going to be a tour, a virtual tour of downtown, and it's going to be talking about the history of our development throughout the years in downtown La Crosse. So we'll end the program series with that. But thank you.